No, we were at Atlanta. Oh, that's what. I mean, what was
This is our new.
So that's gonna we've won both our games so far. I was really excited.
Okay. This is our new site. How we that's it. That's the interview process. What I've been waiting for. That's right. They showed up a while ago.
He wasn't finished with it. On there is like.
This time, we'll call the September the 12th, 2022 meeting to order and welcome everybody in attendance. At this time, if you will, please join us for standing and pledge allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, to the republic which stands one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Ladies and gentlemen, the next item is approval of board minutes. I handed you them. Question?
I make a motion that we approve the August 8th, board minutes.
Motion and second, any further discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Motion carries 7-0. Right. Moving then down to instructional, the first item we have here is to open this.
Yes, sir. Appreciate you recognizing us for that. We'll do a tag team approach to a variety of different things. I did want you to know that it seemed to us to have a pretty good start this year. We had a great competition leading up to the school year. And then I know that Mr. Ashworth, you had gone around, Scope went around to some schools, Gibson went around to some schools. Felt like everybody was doing pretty well this new school year. You're excited, staff were excited, so really appreciate that. I did want to share some enrollment numbers with you, and it's my pleasure to turn it over to Miss Adrienne Hammond. Can do that. She'll kind of go down that list. So, Ms. Hammond, fire away.
Yes, thank you. It's so good to be back in Polk County. Awesome. So let's just take a peek at this. Our overall enrollment end of the school year, 2021-22, until the beginning of this school year, we're up by 38 students. That's good. I want to point out a couple of details about the data. We're going to start with the Polk County Early College. It appears that there's 27 additional students this year than last year, but I want to explain why that is. One of the requirements for the new North Carolina law is that virtual students can no longer be housed in their elementary or middle or high school. They have to be enrolled in a virtually approved school. And we're fortunate to have one of those here in Polk County, and that's through the Polk County Early College. So all of those virtual academy students have been placed under the umbrella of the early college. So there are 22 of the virtual students. So their enrollment is up by 5 students. And then let's look at the, so we talked about how there are 38 additional students. Just to kind of give you some perspective, even though they are spread out among many grade levels and throughout our county, that would be about the equivalent of adding 2 additional classrooms to our enrollment here in Polk County. And finally, looking at the preschool information, we are right where we historically are with preschool enrollment. There are some spaces that get reserved for 3-year-olds, and there are specific requirements that those students have to meet. But Ms. Harding says that we are at the same amount of enrollment that we typically are at the start of the school year. So thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Hammond. I would just add to that did generate a need to make another position available for a kindergarten class. Those numbers went up, and so we had to do that at Sunny View Elementary School, and it's good to see those Sunny View numbers coming up in terms of enrollment. And there are still some students on our rolls that we're waiting to see if they come or not. They're listed as being coming here. For example, I had some neighbors move in from Arizona who had their child who just got to school today because they were moving. So we may end up adding some more there, but that number, as you know, fluctuates throughout the year. So we'll keep you updated on those. But it's good to see kids back in school. It's good to see enrollment up, and it's certainly good to have all of our teachers. Do remind you that we are still struggling for bus drivers. They're just that is across the country. There are districts who are doing different things to try to address that, and we can talk about that later. But overall, I felt like it was a really good start to the year. Wanted to get you the enrollment numbers and let you know that I really felt like our schools did a great job welcoming kids back and making sure that the first couple of weeks were positive and upbeat. So, questions on the opening of school? And you guys who were at the schools can comment if you want to do something else.
Well, I thought it all went very well. Yes, indeed. Not too bad with the car lines, even though we have a little bit of issues here and there, but overall seemed to get worked out pretty quick. So fairly smooth start to school.
Yes, sir.
Welcome the new
Yeah, Mr. Parsons, you may.
principal at Salute Elementary, and she seemed to be in absolute control of everything, so in a good way.
Right, very good. That was information only. We'll move on to item number 2, which is the federal consolidated application plans for 2022-2023. Ms. Jan Crum.
Good evening, members of the board. It's another fabulous day to be working in Polk County Schools. And what I brought to you tonight is, once again, the annual application that I have to submit for federal programs. It's our Title I, Title II, and Title IV application. And as you know, we use this money to work with our at-risk students. The Title I teachers also pull those students and work with them on their ELA and academics at the elementary level. We also use this money to fund our preschool program, summer remediation programs, professional development for teachers, and many other activities. So one of my favorite initiatives that we started last year was actually to provide every student in Polk County Schools that's in elementary school, starting in preschool through 5th grade, with a set of 5 books to take home at the end of the year to begin their home library sets. And so if you start with us in preschool, by the time you are finished with 5th grade, you will have 35 books that have been given to you from Polk County Schools to read at home. And we know that that's very valuable to students. And then if they happen to go to summer school, in addition to that, they'll get an additional 10 books every year that they attend summer school. So love putting books in children's hands. It's a great initiative. We're excited about it. So I'm bringing this tonight to you for your approval of the consolidated application.
Questions for Ms. Crawford? All right, this is an actionable item. We'll be looking for a motion and a second for approval.
I'll make a motion. Second.
I have a motion and a second. Is there any further discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Motion carries 7-0. Thank you, Ms. Crawford.
Thank you.
Moving along to item number 3, the 2021-2022 testing update. Adrian Hammond and Dave Sherman.
We flipped a coin and I think I lost. I'm not sure. She, we planned this, I kind of talked about her doing it. And then she said, well, it's my last time. I shouldn't be, lose the opportunity to tell you about it. As Brandon said earlier, that she's really good. So that's that one. So if you click on that link, this is our testing data. I've used this site since 2013 or 14, somewhere in there, where each year I post how our students have done. And there's lots and lots of information in here. There's the reports that I've created out of information from North Carolina. There's the whole data sets that the Department of Public Instruction has made available. I'm going to go through just a few of these. And number 1 on there is what do we call our Polk County State ranking chart. It's this colorful chart that's out there. It has many, many different indicators for how our students have performed. And the one that I start with is the line that when you put all of our tests together, you put everything that we have tested over the last year, all the reading tests, all the math tests, all those science tests from 3rd grade all the way through high school, we had about 67.5% of our students that we call meeting grade level proficiency. This is students that have scored a level 3, a level 4, or a level 5. So what we would normally call passing for these tests, 67.5%. That is, when you look at the ranking, it puts us 3rd in the state behind Chapel Hill and Union County. That is a place that we're very proud to be. We have been first a couple of times. We've been second a few times. We're 3rd this year, and that's about the place we've been for the last couple of years. If you know anything about Chapel Hill or you know anything about Union County, those are communities that are significantly different in a lot of ways than Polk County right here. But our students are performing at that level right there. They're performing, when you put all of those tests together, and you average them all out, that 67.5% of our students are proficient. Although that number is good when comparison to everybody else across the state, that is significantly down from where we were pre-COVID time. So that number would have been 75 and closer to 80%. So there's still a lot of room, a lot of things that our teachers and our schools need to do to focus on over the next couple of years to get us back to the location we were pre-COVID, but to keep in mind that relative to the rest of the school systems, we're staying in the same relative place. So our students have lost and started to make up that ground at the level that some of these other school systems have. As you work your way down, the next 6 indicators are all math. We hit somewhere, in the about 60 to 70% proficient in those. You can look on there and you find one big outlier. That's one of the things that when the middle school brings you their school improvement plan for next year, you'll see that big indicator there for 7th grade as a significant difference off of the rest of our grades. And then we should expect that when you see their plan for next month, that they'll have strategies to work with those 7th grade students to move those along. Our ELA is the next set. You'll notice that this one's pretty unique. We rank no less than 4th on all 6 of those indicators. The 2 people that were normally above us, Camden, Chapel Hill, Camden, Chapel Hill, Camden, Chapel Hill, over and over again as you look at those rankings right there. So if many of you knew Walker Williams, one of our principals, and his adamant thing that he just focused on over and over again is that if students can read, they can learn to do the rest of the things. And so I think that's one of the things that our teachers really focused on during this last year as students came back to school and started to get as normal a school year as possible last year, is focusing on those reading skills. And that's what's going to take them to move forward. As you look at our 5th and 8th grade science, 5th grade science is significantly lower than it's been in past years. 70% is pretty low. That normally is somewhere in the mid 80s. Unlike the 7th grade science, which I think is something that we need to definitely focus on, or 7th grade math is something we definitely need to focus on. I think the 5th grade science is not one I'm terribly concerned about, and it needs to be addressed in our school improvement plans that are coming up. But if you were a 5th grade teacher and you taught everything, reading, math, science, social studies, you prioritized reading skills, you prioritized math skills, and then you got to the other things that were out there. That making sure our students could do math, making sure they could do science have been the focus of our students for the last, or making they do math, they could do ELA has been the focus of their instruction for the last couple of years. This one will come back up as our teachers have more time to work there. The next section is all how we did it when you put all the grades together, 3rd through 8th grade math, 3rd through 8th grade science, 3rd through 8th grade ELA, and then all those tests together. The next 3 in the purple is actually a pretty amazing accomplishment for Dr. Schweitzer's last year at the high school. As far as I can remember, as I started to look back through the data, this is the first time in many, many years that in all 4 of those subjects, our Polk County High School has been ranked, for the most part, Polk County High School, also our early college. But the vast majority of the students come from the high school, has ranked in the top 10 in all 4 of the indicators that we have for high school measured, the 4 EOCs, Math 1, Math 3, Biology, and English 2 there. When you put all those together, we ranked 5th between Chapel Hill, Carteret, Watauga, and Union, those 5 right there. So when you look at the rankings, we did about where we have traditionally done. Just understand that our percentage of students that are scoring proficient is lower than it has been in our pre-COVID years. There's a bunch of asterisks up at the top there, and should go back to the right. Thank you. Then I want to point out that number 1, I'm doing this on what's called grade level proficiency, the students that scored levels 3, 4, and 5. That's an indicator, if you go back to 2013 and all those years, that I've always used grade level proficiency. We're not in a community like Chapel Hill or Watauga or some of those others that have a university in their backyard, and they may be more focused on what percentage of our students are college and career ready, meaning just the top 2 levels, levels 4 and 5. I put on there the next one that the ranking is at 115. The next one shows if we were to use the college and career ranking, that achievement levels of just 4 and 5, we would have gone from ranking 3rd to ranking 5th in North Carolina. So when you're, instead of just students that have all levels 3, 4, and 5, just the top 2 levels 4 and 5, our ranking changed from 3rd to 5th. Still not a bad place to be out of 115 school systems in North Carolina. I do kind of look on there as Ms. Hammond and I were going through this, she pointed out that in 2 of those, I actually had it wrong. We actually tied with 2 of the school systems. So like 5th and 8th grade science, I had us ranked as 8th, and she noticed that 7th also tied. So we actually bumped them up right there. I do point out one other thing, 67.5. We came in 2nd. I should say that we came in 3rd. The 2nd ranked school system was 67.6. If you look at the state actual reports, their public report that goes out, not the detailed ones we have, both of those are rounded up to whole numbers to 68. So you could argue we're number 2, but I use the more detailed data that says 67.5 versus 67.6 right there. So you can choose how you want that one to go. Any questions about our rankings in relation to the state?
Is
Yes,
this the point where we can cheer?
you can. And I'll say our teachers worked unbelievably hard last year. to try to make up those losses. You'll see part of that in another report I'm going to show you in a little while, that our teachers, our families, getting kids back to school and in school and there every day, they really worked hard on that last year. So back one for me. There's the next one is what we do is our regional comparison. Obviously, if we did well across the state of North Carolina, we should have done well in our region. And I kind of throw this chart out there. Those are the same indicators, the same math indicators, the same reading indicators, the same science indicators. And I make this one a little bit different. I compare it to the school system, the public school systems around us. So Asheville City, Buncombe County, Haywood County, Henderson County, Madison, McDowell, Rutherfordton, and Transylvania, all those school systems that are kind of in our region here. Blue means we were the highest ranking school system on each of those indicators. So if you take a look, we have a lot of blue in our column. Green means we ranked second in our region on that particular indicator compared to these other school systems here. And yellow means we ranked third on those indicators. Again, using grade level proficiency as our measure right there. Obviously, if you rank third in the state or second in the state, however you want to say that, you're going to do well in our region. But I think it's a really good way to look at how we're doing in relation to the school systems around us, because for the last couple of years, for the most part, a lot of these school systems use the same strategies to get out of for years that we were in COVID and last year, and we moved through a lot of those similar strategies. There are friends, our colleagues that we call on a very regular basis. Henderson County and us, we do a lot of things in comparison time with the Rutherford County. Transylvania is a school system very much like our size and has a lot of things consistent with us. So that's one of those indicators that I use right there. Just the way I like to point out that information. All of that came from, thank you, back on Brendan, came from the next three links. So we don't need to click on these, you can be forward, but North Carolina has huge collections of data sets that are out there. You can click on those, you can pull down the spreadsheets, you can do your own filtering and sorting and everything that you would like to do with those. The next one is their accountability brief. Scroll back up there just a second, Brad. Thank you. Their accountability brief. This is a 3-page summary of North Carolina's testing program for last year. Things that have changed from the years in the past and the differences for this year. The last one is North Carolina's new testing dashboard. North Carolina has always looking for a way to present this data in a way that is easy for the public to go in and pull out the information they want. How can I compare school systems? How can I compare schools? Any of those things along there. This is their new testing dashboard. That's out there. It has every chart and graph and everything that you may want on there. Right now, you're looking at the overall composites for all subjects and grades in 21-22 for all students. And then the top right-hand corner is where you can change between college and career ready, which is the levels 4 and 5, and grade level proficient, which is the grades 3, the achievement levels 3, 4, and 5. So this data set lets you go through. On the left-hand side, you can switch it down to county level. You can switch it down to school system level by region. You can work your way all the way down to schools, or you can go to the very last link on there and pull out the spreadsheet, the data that's part of that, and open that up. I did learn, you may or may not have known this, the maximum number of lines that can be in a Excel spreadsheet is 1.6 million. Because this data file has more than 1.6 million lines in it. So I learned that last week as this data came out. So that's that one right there. It's a lot of information you can go through and pull out what you want right there. But it's just a really good thing. When you look at our students, they're starting to make the recovery from the last couple of years. We're staying in our same relative location and expect nothing more as we move forward there. Question about our overall achievement. Yes.
Do you get the sense that the teachers and the students understand this? They know how well they're doing, or does it not register?
I believe they know how well they're doing. Mr. Green did send out a message to all of our staff to congratulate them, to share this information. I think, I'm married to a teacher. Dr. Schweitzer is married to a teacher. I think they're looking at themselves and saying, that's really nice, but I got 18, 19, 20 kids in my classroom right now, and I'm putting my head down and dealing with these 20. I really believe that's what happened. They're very glad. They looked at their chart, their line there, and said fourth grade math, and they said really good, but I've got 18 kids that I got to deal with right now.
No, I think that's what I enjoy about, talking with our teachers when we go around the schools, and we will shortly in the fall and have our data meetings and things like that. One of the things you hear back from those schools is that they are very intentional about immediately getting to the kids they have now, making sure they've got good relationships and understand where their gaps are, so that they understand this doesn't come without a great deal of work. So they will take a moment, they'll celebrate a little bit, but like you said, they're very focused on the kids they have right now and the gaps, the opportunity we did not have for teaching and learning. We've got to continue to get those scores to come up. So, but our staff, kids, very resilient, families, very resilient. I mean, it was a tough year for everybody involved. So to do that well, I think is great. And I certainly apologize to the board for dropping a position. It's not what we like. We like to be first, but certainly appreciate the board's support. It takes your governance as well.
I think given the environment, those are great results. So
Yeah.
Kudos. Thank you very much.
We're going to the next section here. The next one is our school performance grades. Legislation was passed in, I think it was 1617, where every school in North Carolina must be given a letter grade. It's a combination, it's a combination of two things: the percentage of students that have passed the tests, and that's the students passing as levels 3, 4, and 5, or we call grade level proficient. And that counts as 80% of your final grade. And then the other 20% is the amount of growth that your school is making. So we use Polk Central as an example right here. So they had 66% of their students on all those 3rd, 4th, and 5th grade tests pass that test. They had 64.6% of those students grew at least the amount they were expected. So North Carolina uses what's called the EVOS tool, the Educator Value Assessment System. Thank you. That tool. And in essence, what it does is it looks at Dave and it looks at his scores in 4th grade. And then it finds all 3rd and 4th grade, and it finds all the other students across North Carolina. And it figures out, where did the average student that looked like Dave, what did he score in 5th grade? And did Dave get to the place that all the other students that looked like him academically, did he get there? Did he make the expected amount of growth? Did he exceed the growth of that group of students that mathematically looks like him? Or did he fall behind the group of students that looked like him? And in this particular case, Polk Central, 64.6% of those students made the expected amount of growth. When you put those two together and they're weighting, their overall performance grade came out as a 66, and on that school makes Polk Central a C school right now. We rarely have too many C schools. So this is something that you'll see addressed in Polk Central School Improvement Plan coming to you next year or next month. Is, that's not a place they would like to be. If you notice, they're at a 66. To get out of the C range, they need to get to a 70. So they're not significantly far off, but it's something that the school is going to be working on this year. And if you take a look, one of the things that we know happened at that school is the next column. Not as many students made the amount of growth that was expected of them. So if you scroll down just a little bit, you'll notice a difference between Sunnyview and Polk Central. Fewer students passed the test at Sunnyview. Only 60% of the students at that particular school passed the test. But those students grew a significant amount. So 75, almost 76% of those students grew at least the amount that was expected of them. And they met their growth, where Polk Central students did not. And so that's something that the school needs to work on. As you work your way down, you'll notice Salute is a B. They met their expected growth. Expected growth, when you try to guess where a student is supposed to fall, it's not a perfect measure. And so it's on this scale that 0, if I ended 5th grade exactly where I was expected to go, I would end at 0. I'd have a growth of 0. I ended exactly where I was supposed to be. there's a buffer on each side from -2 to +2, kind of gives me 2 points on each side of that measure that says, if you're within 2 points, we're going to call that met. You're, close enough for horseshoes kind of thing. You hit within the range, and it's only when you're above 2 or below -2 that you fall outside of the met range there. So Tryon Met. Polk County Middle School is a perfect example. That almost 87% of their students that made or exceeded their growth measures. They had so many that exceeded their growth measure that their school actually exceeded, as a whole, the school exceeded the amount of growth that they would expect to have in this year. They hit 2.69, I think that is right there. Polk County High School. And then the early college, just as an example, they have such a small number. When you only have 7 kids taking the math test and the things, it's hard to do that measuring. There's not enough students to do the measure on. So this is a quick summary of how the schools did. This is now, when you get to the data files that are the next link in there, this will break it out for males and females. It'll make it out for ethnic groups, for economically disadvantaged, special ed students at those schools. And that's part of the data that the schools will use in their school improvement plans. What part of those groups did well, did not do well, and how do we address those changes moving forward? There's a whole data file to go on that one. We don't need to look at that. The last part that's on this report is our 3rd grade Read to Achieve proficiency. You already saw from the first report the percentage of our students that met the 3rd grade reading standard, 65% right there. So we're required each year to report these numbers. Remember, students can only go on to 4th grade if a couple of things. They've met reading proficiency at that grade. So they've scored a level 3, 4, 5 on the test. They, for one reason or another, should not be held to that standard. In essence, they are a student that is disabled or so disabled that they should not be held to that standard. And first year in the United States, non-English speakers are allowed to move on. Eventually they hit the standard where that doesn't apply. So the Polk County Schools report is there. That is now broken into a report for each of the elementary schools for 3rd grade. And then we also have to report how our 1st and 2nd graders are doing progressing to that standard. So the last one there is a report for 1st and 2nd graders moving up to 3rd grade. This 2nd graders moved to 3rd grade, moving up to that standard for this year. Again, it was lower than we've had in the past. Some of those students came to do summer school with us this past summer. They get a second opportunity to take that test. They get a second opportunity to show their reading proficiency in a number of other ways, and moved on to 4th grade if they met those standards. So those are some of the required and some reports that I want to make sure you understand about our students' performance from last year.
Do you find the ones that had the C grade that it was more of one grade level, like 4th or 5th or 3rd, or was it all every class that done that 3rd, 4th, and 5th?
There are definitely some, like the middle school, where you saw it's easy to pick out the middle school because all we have is 6th grade. And so when we're talking about like that 7th grade math, that is a definite focus. When you look at Polk Centrals and you delve into that data, there are definitely grade areas where there is concerns there, and they'll address that in their plan.
Questions from Mr. Sherman?
Well, I'd like to say Dave has done a phenomenal job training me and training Dr. Schweitzer. We are so blessed to have him stay on for these couple of months to provide us with just the insights, his wealth of knowledge. So thank you so much to Mr. Sherping.
You're welcome. I'm enjoying it. Thank y'all.
Thank you. Folks, that was information only. We'll then move on to our 4th topic underneath instructional, and that is overnight field trip proposals. Mr. Green.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. As you can see, I did submit two overnight field trip requests from Polk County High School. One is for our FFA, 8 students and 2 teachers going to the National FFA Convention. They do that pretty regularly. I think they got some extra funding to take care of some of those expenses this year. And then we also had an individual approach our construction technology kids. And this would be one of the first times they've gone to the Skills USA conference. And so Mr. Morlino would like to do that as well, but they had a donor contribute to them to send them on their way. The construction tech trip, I know taking it to you right now falls within the 6-week guideline. They did give me this information just in the nick of time. As soon as that person approached them about possibly going, Mr. Morlino got with me, went through the guidelines. That's why you see it on his form. He literally used the exact form. So feel good about that. And I know there was a question, I think, on the 6-week timeline. So he did get it to me, get it to us in time. Both of these do have principal endorsement letters. The other thing I think is noteworthy is, you cannot, right now, it's not approved transportation from the federal or state side to get anything, I think, larger than a 9-passenger van. And so if we do rent vans, they're going to be less than 9 passengers, 7, 8, those things, or basically minivans or SUVs. So you can get an Expedition or an Explorer. And that's because of, I guess, the trouble they've had over the years with some of those bigger vans. Turning over, not to disparage any organization, but you might have an organization that's had a van for a long time, has to check the tires, you'll have a blowout. And anyway, long story short, they don't want kids riding in those things. So you either have to go full-blown activity bus or get a couple of smaller vehicles, which is much more fuel efficient and probably more comfortable than riding to, Indiana on an activity bus. So that's what they'll do. All that is covered by insurance, and we make sure it meets all the guidelines with our transportation department. But want to point that out to you, and certainly I'll recommend approval of boat trips. Great experiences for our kids.
Questions from Mr. Green? This is an actionable item. We'll be looking for a motion and a second for approval.
I make
So
a
moved.
motion that we do the construction technology and the national FFA convention trips.
All right,
I'll second.
I have a second. Is there any further discussion? All in favor, say aye. Aye. Opposed, nay. Motion carries 7-0. Moving on under administrative, first item we have here is the attendance policy 4400, first reading. Ms. Lindley Foster.
Sounds good, Mr. Chair. I don't know that Ms. Lindley is here. I don't know that she is. I think she had to cover tonight. So Lindley Foster out there, Ms. Harding. Okay, good deal. So I'll run through it. So we wanted to take a look at our attendance policy and try to make some changes in the attendance policy that better reflect where we're at as a school system in terms of how we try to approach and attack this, and also reflects kind of best practice across the state in terms of what people are doing. As you know, with the pandemic, we got into a situation where we had to be very lenient with attendance. There were some legitimate issues when people would become ill or other things like that. So we were very forgiving on that side of things. But I think Ms. Foster, in dealing with social services and truancy matters over the years, she has noticed that we didn't really have a robust policy in terms of how to direct and guide people, not only from a punitive aspect, but from a support aspect. What can we do to really encourage attendance? It also did not have a true definition of what we would call chronic absenteeism. And that is something that once a student gets to about 10 days or more absent, that is typically a symptom of a bigger issue. And so that's something going on with the family where they need help and support, something going on with the individual student, maybe it's a health matter. And so by defining chronically absent and allowing us to go down those roads, it gives us some more resources to throw at families and kids to try to help them out. So we offer this to you on first reading. It is very similar to what our old policy was. It definitely follows the law that's in place. Mr. Fagan, I know we're putting you on the spot. Short notice. Did you see anything in there that?
I went through and just tried to, tick off the boxes in terms of what we had in the old policy and what the statutes say. For example, things like dealing with homeless students, there are exceptions that we have to recognize under existing laws. And I thought everything was pretty much in line. I didn't see anything that I thought was terribly askew. Under C, late arrivals and early departures, this is nothing substantive, but I think we would want to say parent or guardians there in that third paragraph in that section.
Sure.
Because we've made it parents or guardians everywhere else.
Appreciate that.
Obviously, took out the provisions for suspended students.
Yeah, that was another reason we want to change the policy.
Because
You don't want to suspend kids for being truant. That is correct.
that was explained last time. The state statute on truancy provides that after 3 days, you notify parents, and then it goes on to prescribe whatever punishments or prosecutions are available or attributable, what things are attributable to parents, and also involvement of DSS. And it does say that principal should notify parents to take all other steps required by GS 115C 378, which is in fact the state
Statute.
statute.
Thanks, sir. I appreciate that. Again, I think the changes were to both, let's talk about chronic absenteeism. Let's get a little bit more specificity in terms of how we approach it. Let's remove that we're going to suspend kids for being absent, and make sure that when Ms. Foster does engage with families that she's able to have documentation and have a policy that backs that up. I want to make it clear that the only time we ever go to the magistrate with any type of charges is when after we've exhausted everything we possibly can in working with those parents, working with those families, those guardians. And so throwing resources at them, meeting them halfway, figuring out whether it's transportation, is there some custody issue. So I want to make sure the board's aware that that is a very last resort, still obligated by law. And sometimes, as you know, folks don't think it's real until you go down that road. But at the end of the day, our goal is to have kids in school and support them, not to go and have legal action against them or their family. So please know that's not the purpose of the policy. The policy is to promote attendance. We know that kids being in school leads to better achievement for our students.
On line item 9, it says that in the case of absent short-term out of school suspension, should we take that out? Because we don't want them out of school.
Where are you looking at? Well, right underneath number 9.
Okay.
Yeah, you're talking about right here. Yeah. And your issue with it is,
Well, we want to keep as many students in school, and it says short-term suspension. I mean.
right, but that's in the case of those excused absences, short-term suspensions and absences under that statute, the student will be permitted to make up his work. So we're just clarifying that they have the opportunity to make up work if they're absent. So it doesn't say that we're going to suspend them for that. That's if they're suspended, we have to make sure they're given the opportunity to make up work. So good for catching the word suspension. Yep.
Other questions from Mr. Green on this policy?
Ms. Foster knew she might not be able to be here tonight. She was dealing with another situation. She sends her regrets, but I certainly told her I would advocate on her behalf as well.
This is again an actionable item. We'll be looking for a motion and a second for approval, pending the amendments that Mr. Fagan has recommended.
I move the approval of attendance policy for full-time on first reading.
A second.
We have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? All in favor, say aye. Aye. Opposed, nay. Motion carries 7-0. Moving on to the second bullet point here, local supplement. Again, Mr. Green.
So we'll be talking about teacher supplements right now. As the board knows, I gave you a basically a big spreadsheet last month where you kind of mull over and see what we were thinking of. I do want to make sure we cover some bullet items in terms of where we've been with this conversation over the years so that we have context. As you know, we did approach the board before the pandemic and had talked about and actually took action on moving away from a percentage model and moving towards a fixed number so that you could predict your budget accordingly. A lot of school districts have done that because as the state gives raises and those percentages go up, it makes it very unpredictable for finance officers and school systems to budget adequately. So that was a goal of the board and the administration prior to the pandemic. Those ongoing budget cuts, the general cost increases, pay raises, employer costs have gone up along with that. And so that percentage approach just is not something that we felt like we could sustain or was necessarily appropriate over time. We did at one time and enacted a freeze of that supplement and even said that we were going to wait for an employee to be here for 3 years to make sure they were going to stick with Polk County Schools before we gave a teacher supplement in that case. The board went back, made a decision to make sure we gave every teacher a supplement, but we did stick with that year's number in terms of a freeze. An increase in our overall funding during the pandemic allowed us to continue with that level of supplement, in addition to the other bonuses that this board and the ESSER money provided to teachers and staff for working. And so last year, the state provided money to help smaller districts address what we call supplement disparity. So in a place like Buncombe County, who has a large tax base, can give a 10% supplement. Polk County is not quite as large, so we were down at the 4.5% kind of level. So the state very graciously decided to allot that money, especially to your smaller and low income districts, to help with that supplement leveling across regions. Even though that's there last year, and we were glad to hear it's there this year, we still need to move forward with a change in our model, so that when that money, if that money goes away, we have something that's still sustainable for us. So I think it's important during this discussion to understand that whatever we come up with this year, we will turn around and vote on another proposal again next year. So this would be just for this year, the 22-23 school year. And, you know, no matter their credentials or experience level, we should have every teacher in this district who gets a supplement, they're going to get a larger supplement, in most cases, a substantially larger supplement because of that additional money. And that's awfully nice to be able to do, especially given what they have done over the last few years. Again, that model will need to be revisited. And then we were waiting for the final budget amount to get into our system. Debbie did confirm that, Ms. Lovelace, on Friday, so we were able to put these numbers out. So I did hand out prior to the meeting, and Dr. Schweitzer, you can scroll down to see that level. This is our proposal to you. This is taking, what the board had agreed to do with our local supplement side, and then also applying the monies we received from the state side to come up with this amount for the school year for our teachers. If you look, there's going to be a tier process. We propose that again because we want to get to a predictable model where we can understand that teachers do need a bump as they go up the ladder, but we're not doing it every single year, and it's not quite as susceptible to wide variations in their pay. So you can see 0 to 4 years, 5 to 9, on up the ladder, and their total amount. We would propose doing a larger chunk, about 2/3 of that in the fall, for 2 reasons. Number one, that gets that state money that we're spending out of the way, so we can see, did you spend it all? Did you not spend it all? Where are we at with that state money? And then we could apply any of that overage or difference to the springtime. But 2/3 in the fall, that's usually given out right before the Thanksgiving holiday. And then at the end of the year, they would get about 1/3, which you can see those amounts right there. I have heard from teachers, and being one in the past, I can tell you there is a pretty dry spot around January. Whenever your pay is kind of wonky in those months. And so giving that bigger portion of the supplement in the fall, I hope will not, be too onerous to teachers. I think that it helps them out in getting over that holiday hump in that regard. So I don't feel like, this is going to necessarily cause them to have any kind of trepidation. I am proud to say that, in terms of your lower differential, in most cases, these supplements are at least $1,100, some all the way up to $2,000 more than what teachers were getting before. On the high end, which would be a teacher who's nationally board certified and has a master's degree, it's at least on the very, very lowest end, at least $600, but the majority of them are going to get $700, $800, $900, even $1,500 at the top of that scale, more money than they would have gotten under the old process. So I like it because it is more money for teachers, and it is using that state funding that we got to provide those supplements. So this is the supplement proposal the administration brings to you. It doesn't require your action. And again, one more time, we'll remind you, this is for this year, and we'll need to revisit again for next year. Happy to answer any questions.
Questions for Mr. Green? As he has said, it's an actionable item. We'll need a motion and a second for approval. Second. Motion and a second. Is there any further discussion? All in favor, say aye. Aye. Opposed, nay. Motion carries 7-0. On to our third point under administrative. We have the PCHS construction update. Mr. Brandon Schweitzer, or Dr. Brandon Schweitzer.
So as you guys are aware, for the last year now, you've been receiving monthly updates on the ongoing HVAC project at Polk County High School. We're happy to report that we are closing in on the finish line. The physical install of all of the equipment is now in place across all of the zones. I know Mr. Sherping has been breaking this out by areas across our high school over time. So we're happy to say all of that physical equipment is now in place. As you're aware, if you've ever had any experience building a home, it's never the bulk of the construction the problem. It's always the stuff at the very end, all the punch list items, the trim, the little things. So where we're at right now in this process is finalizing some of our actual training, some of our punch list items, little things that have need some tweaking along the way. Some that you may have been made aware of is we have some ongoing issues that they've been very attentive to regarding some leaking in our gym area. But again, they've been very responsive in remediating those leaks in that zones. And then one of the biggest ones that's still hanging out there is the agreement on how we're going to handle the construction damage to our floors. So we're still in negotiations with Brady Construction about how we're navigating that process. But again, they've been very responsive to us so far and agreeable to where we are with things. So also our test and balance is in progress. So we're now entering the phase where while the physical equipment is in place, they're going through and they're testing out and balancing all of that equipment in each one of those rooms so that they function at an optimal level. We've also received all of our training for how this system operates. I can tell you from personal experience and getting to jump into this, that it collects just about every scrap of data you can possibly imagine related to HVAC, from humidity levels to cubic foot volumes of air going into a room. The system's even smart enough to know when you set a particular schedule for you want the building to be at a temperature, say at 7 a.m., it learns throughout the course of the year about, given ambient air temperatures, what it will take and the power it needs to apply to get that building up to temp across that year. So right now we're in that learning phase. It obviously hasn't made it to that point yet, but that's pretty remarkable for what the system is and what's in place. So you can see our updated project expenses and what is remaining left on the budget. Again, we are just down to the wire on some of those punch list items and closing things out. So any questions from the board at this time?
We had the facilities together one day late last week, and I'll say it's a pretty impressive system. It was neat to go through that with you, Mr. Sherping. That was quite impressive. So it was definitely, it was expensive, but it's clearly going to be worth it.
One thing I'll add, Mr. Chair, is that as we talked about this project from the beginning, I think our goal is to make sure that we do the things from an infrastructure standpoint that will allow this high school. It's going to be 30 this year. That's hard for people to believe, but we want it to go another 30 years. And so doing a project like this, even though it's expensive, that will take care of our HVAC system for the next 30 years. And so I think we're some paving, some roof work, and some restroom work away from making sure that building is good to go for the next 30 years. If you tried to build our high school right now, it would be somewhere in the $45 to $50 million range. So it behooves us to make sure we're investing in that school and making sure we address these issues so that we can have it around.
Any questions for Dr. Schweitzer?
I will just throw in there that we haven't heard any complaints from people attending the volleyball games in your gym so far. So they apparently it's a very positive thing so far.
Very good. Well, that is for information only. That being said, we'll move on to the fourth point under administrative, and that is the Tryon Elementary preschool edition. Back to Dr. Schweitzer.
That's good. So as we brought to you in the last meeting, Polk County Schools has secured funding through a variety of sources for a pre-K addition onto Tryon Elementary School. What I've done, let me zoom out just a little bit here, is to give you just a very vague overlay of where this, or adjusted overlay of where we're looking for this expansion to have. It is off of what is known as the annex building, towards the back end of the building. This pre-K expansion would include 5 classrooms and workspaces for pre-K. This essentially transplants the existing Forbes infrastructure up to the main campus, which I can tell you is a really nice thing to have that campus unified, have all of those kids on one site. Drilling down a little bit deeper, you may have noticed while you came in, we put some scaled drawings out on the walls. So if you didn't get a chance to see that, we would like for you to take a look on your way out today. This gives you a little bit more detailed view of what we're looking at in terms of an addition to that annex area. These classrooms are quite a bit larger than what the Forbes staff has been used to operating inside of. They're somewhere between 30 to 33 feet in each direction across, with ample storage, plenty of access to restroom facilities, all the kinds of things that you would need. It's also laid out in a much better layout in terms of enclosure, school security, all those kinds of pieces. The reason why we're not ready to talk a little bit about contract and moving forward at this point, I know last board meeting we had talked about that being a possibility for this one, is we did go back and forth a little bit with the pre-K staff over some minor tweaks and changes. We also met with the facility subcommittee to get their input, take a look at some things on this area. And we also have some tweaking to the outside of the building. And while we like the inside layout and the general footprint, We're still not entirely satisfied with how the traffic flow is going to lay out, parking, turnaround, those kinds of pieces. So there's still some work to be done. Obviously, once we get to a better place, we'd like to submit that for contractual review to Mr. Fagan, and then present that to the board at our next meeting. So any questions at this time?
All right. Again, that's just for information only, so we will be moving on to the next bullet point, number 5, under administrative, instructional, and supplementary materials policy. Mr. Green.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. We had our discussions last month about this and went through some of the details in the policy. There were some suggestions made in terms of, for example, making sure we spelled out Media and Technology Advisory Committee, make sure we put the word school in those areas. And so we've tried to make those changes accordingly. Obviously, if you see anything that we did not get taken care of, please let us know. And then under 3200R, I do believe.
You'll notice the changes are in red. Anything that we changed since the last time you saw it are in red right now.
So if you look under 3200R, there was a request to look at the word suitability when talking about the content of works and their relative balance in terms of the merit of the work. In other words, is the book's purpose or the work's purpose intended to simply gratify, some type of content, or are they celebrating the profanity, or is it used to a better purpose or a bigger purpose for the work? And so we have thrown some work. We tried to wordsmith this and look at vocabulary and didn't come up with anything super great, but instead of suitability, we could say content balance, worthiness, appropriateness. Didn't know how you guys felt about that. Is there a particular word that sticks out that you'd like to use?
Any comments?
I kind of like worthiness. Which, to me is kind of saying it's worth having it there.
Well, it's a criteria that you could use to assess whether,
What is worth having?
what's the balance? Is the balance worth having that material there?
Versus ancillary, sure.
Right.
Mr. Cole?
I like context balance myself.
I think that's the more descriptive in terms of the intent of the criteria.
Of what it's meant to be.
You're trying to balance.
I like the content balance.
Ms. Jackson, how do you feel about that?
I would go with contact balance, reading
All right.
better than the suitability policy.
And certainly the criteria descriptions there. So regardless of that word you use at the top, the committee is going to know how to approach that. So I hear the board leaning towards content balance. Is that what? Okay. All right. And other than that, I'm happy to answer any questions. I think, again, we had a policy that was somewhat vague and arbitrary. And whenever you're trying to make determinations about materials, being vague and arbitrary and capricious is not good. So by having a very clear process and clear criteria and factors to consider, I feel like this will enable our MTAC committees in our schools to do a better job, not only evaluating the current materials that are in place, both from an instructional and supplemental standpoint, but also any materials that we would be purchasing to place in our schools. So I think it gives everybody a much better process to go through, and certainly allows us to deal more specifically with individual materials. Again, the other part of that policy that we really wanted to harp on was the fact that you're separating instructional materials or what's required in the classroom with supplemental materials that may be, for example, media center books or things like that.
And just to point out, this does give parents the ability to sign, to say they do not want their children accessing certain parts of the library, right?
That part has always been available. If a parent wanted to, investigate any, or a family member or guardian wanted to investigate materials or take a look at them and review them and then ask for alternative assignments, that policy has been in your policy manual for as long as I've been here, and they can request an alternative assignment. And certainly if parents don't want access given to their students to certain materials, they've always had the ability. This does spread it, spell it out a little bit more clearly in terms of allowing us to develop those procedures and making it very simple for parents to do that. But you're right. Yes, that's another thing, is to amplify that they have that ability.
And I'll say, as directed, we did send a message home to all of our parents a couple of days after the school year started that said just that, and gave them procedure for doing that if they would like.
It's as simple as calling your principal.
Any other questions on these policies? I assume we can approve them all in one.
That would be up to Fagan, but we've certainly done it that way before.
I think you can, you're changing one.
We are changing the word.
That one separately.
Yeah, we'll do that in a second. All right, fair enough. Well, then these are actionable items. We'll be looking for a motion first to approve policy 3200 for second reading and policy 3210 for second reading.
Also moved. A second.
We have a motion and a second. Is there any further discussion? All in favor, say aye. Opposed, nay. That motion carries 7-0. Then be looking for a motion to approve procedure 3200R pending the amendment that was recommended from Mr. Craig.
Be changing the word suitability to content balance.
Have a motion and have a second.
I second.
Motion and second. Any further discussion? All in favor, say aye. Aye. Opposed, nay. Motion carries 7-0. Next item on the agenda is a student transfer request. Do we want to talk about that now, or do we want to move that into closed session?
Mr. Chair, we did not find anything particularly noteworthy about that request. If somebody has specific questions, obviously we can go into closed session, but we've vetted all that and we feel good about it.
Pretty thorough. Yes, sir.
Make a motion, we approve the student transfer.
One second.
Motion and a second. Any further discussion? All in favor, say aye. Opposed, nay. Motion carries 7-0. Ms. Green, any old business?
I do have, I think, some old business. Let me check. Sure, sir. I apologize. I should have had that ready. I did want to let you know on the child nutrition side of things, the DPI finally clarified what they had told some districts. Some people at the Department of Public Instruction had told some districts one thing, they told other districts another. And so it finally got clarified what our interpretation was the correct one, which is that the program went away and people at the 612 level were going to have to begin paying for meals again. So we got that word out. I will say it's gone pretty well. Jennifer and her staff have worked hard to make sure that we've gotten those applications in for those who need them and processed them. No kid has gone hungry. Everybody's been fed. We've got people who donated money to make sure that that doesn't happen. And in terms of the universal option at the elementary level, I think we're up to, about 40,000 of the 50 or 55 that we're going to need to cover that in donations. So again, just a testament to our community and how many people are willing to step up and help kids out. And I've heard of some other events coming up later on about taking canned food and giving it a thermal belt for our food bag program, which I think is great. That's always a help to thermal belt. And those kids take those bags home. It really helps out too. So just wanted to update you on food service. The other thing I will say is that in looking around with other counties and what they're doing with their transportation departments, we will come back to you in October with probably another request to increase driver pay. Folks, people are making $25 and $30 an hour to drive a dump truck. And the dump truck doesn't have 2 classrooms worth of kids on the back of it screaming at you. So, we're going to have to address that again. Certainly, you were gracious enough to give that, funding for the first increase, and we're going to take another look at that and maybe some type of incentive program for people to become drivers. I don't know of a single superintendent that I've talked to across the state that has not had issues in their districts with parking buses. And it's something we don't like to do, something we don't want to do, but you've got to have a licensed driver on them. So we'll continue to try to beat the bushes. We're advertising on multiple, sites to do that. And we're doing the best we can to facilitate people getting their licenses. But at some point, we're going to have to address the money side of it. So just wanted you prepared for that next month.
Questions for Mr. Green on any of that? Any other old business? Okay.
No, sir.
New business.
No new business, sir.
New business, all right. For information only, you have the preschool monthly report, pre-K financial report, the monthly financial report, and the year-to-date credit card report. There's NCSBA offered optional board training. First at the fall regional meeting at AB Tech campus, September 22nd, 2022 fall law conference in Asheville, October 12th through the 14th. and then the annual conference in Greensboro, November the 14th to the 16th. At this time, we will move to public input. Ladies and gentlemen, we do not have more than 10 signed up to speak this evening, so there'll be no need to amend our policy for the evening. So 3 minutes apiece, that would be less than 30 minutes to fill up. So with that being said, we'll move to our first speaker, and it's Kevin Burnett.
What's left. I want to express my appreciation for this Board of Education. Kind of surprised by that too. I am a resident of Polk County and a parent of a Polk student. For 28 years, I've taught in Polk County schools. During much of that time, and particularly during the tenure of Jeff Tennant, I paid little attention to this school board. I took for granted that the business of guiding the school system was basically in safe hands. I did not always agree with each school board member about every issue, and I still don't. But I trust the intention of each member of this school board. You put in a lot of time and effort and hassle because you care about the community and the young people we serve. You have sent your own children to Polk County schools. Perhaps it never occurred to you to serve on this school board and send your children to school elsewhere because you're acting in good faith. You are true stakeholders, and even though disagreements may arise, I can trust that you are ultimately interested in doing what's right for students. You represent a shared commitment to a purpose and a willingness to respectfully find common ground. The social fabric that undergirds our society is based on the concept of the common good. What we owe each other is an effort to cooperate with one another in pursuit of something greater than our own self-interest. When so much energy seems focused on dividing communities across our country on a few points of difference, it's important to remember that we share this fundamental common goal. Our community depends on a school system focused on educating our children, not turning our schools into one more venue for toxic disagreement. This concept has recently been weaponized by a small minority who have hurled criticism and unyielding hostility at this board. In a time when our institutions seem to be under attack, I realize that I need to stop taking them for granted. Perhaps it's time for the larger community to join us in this conversation and reaffirm our commitment to the shared vision held by a majority of us. Something I've always cherished about Polk County is that although my neighbors may hold different views or opinions from me, there is a tradition here of respect. Disagreeing with me doesn't make my neighbor a threat. That's my neighbor, and we love our kids equally, and we can find common ground on what is best for them. There are a lot of people here who are different from me, but I can trust that they're good-hearted people committed to the common good of Polk County. I hope those people will take notice that it's time to show up for our common good and support the school board so that you can continue with a focus on serving our kids and making Polk County a stronger community. Thank you.
We have Margaret Curtis.
Well, he said some of what I was gonna say, but I guess what I want to talk about is picking up on the toxic hostility thing. When I spoke last time, I talked about this divisiveness and how hard it is to witness people being so unpleasant to our teachers and our school board, and how bullying it is. And in one of the Facebook threads about books in the library, there was somebody who was very passionate about it, and I went to her wall. And what was really interesting to me about her wall was she had several videos that she had taken with her own phone on the wall, and these were publicly visible. And they were of a man instructing the people there how to attack the schools, how to create chaos around issues like books in the library. And the thing that I just kept focusing on when I was looking at this video was they were sitting in a high-rise building, a glass high-rise building. We don't even have buildings like that in Nashville. This video is taken in a big city. Maybe Charlotte, maybe Raleigh, maybe Atlanta, but it's not us. These are people from outside of our community who are whipping up people with a lot of fears that really don't pertain to us and our school system and the wonderful job. We just saw evidence, the math about what a great job our teachers are doing. And anybody who's had a kid in this school system knows that firsthand. If there's a problem, let's just use a different analogy. If there's a problem with your house, let's say you have a leaky roof, or if something's wrong with your plumbing, you don't burn the house down. And when you need help fixing it, you don't scream at the contractors. You don't question their expertise. You don't degrade them. You don't humiliate them. You work on fixing the problem, and you work with the experts who are experts in their field. And I just really feel like we need to honor the fact that we are a small community and we have to get along with our neighbors. Yelling at our neighbors, that doesn't work. It never works, even if you have a real problem with them. And again, I hope as a community, we can come together and express some gratitude for the wonderful job you guys are all doing. Thank you. All I wanted.
Hi, I'm sorry, I'm not sick, I just had was sick in August and it's still sick. So anyway, my name is Tracy Daniels. I live in Polk County, and I have been a national reading advocate and a librarian, cheerleader, and a professional in children's book publishing for over 35 years. And a lot of what I want to say has already been said by Kevin and Margaret and people that have come to previous meetings. Unfortunately, I could not be here in other ones. But I just want to reiterate that reading and book selection is a choice. And when we ban books, we compromise children's education and development. And parents absolutely have the right to participate in the selection of their own children's educational and supplemental reading, but not my children's and not other people's children's or other people's families. We need to trust our school system, our librarian, our professional librarians, and our educators. And I just really want to say I thank you to the board for reiterating and amplifying the new materials policy that that I have always had the right to approach a teacher and a principal about concerns about books, but it should be within that family's choice and not across the board for other people's families.
Next, we have Megan Young.
Hi, my name is Megan Young. I live in Tryon and serve as the pastor of the Congregational Church, United Church of Christ in Tryon. First, I just want to say thank you to you, the school board, and to those involved in school administration and our Polk County teachers. My brother is a teacher in North Carolina, and so I hear often about the challenges of being in education. And I'm just so aware that what you all do is an act of service and sacrifice. And Polk County is a really special school district. And so I just want to say thank you for all the ways that you so tirelessly serve our children and families. Second, I just want to offer a word of gratitude for the libraries in our Polk County schools. Our church was curious about the books that are currently being challenged. And so we decided to read some of them this summer. And I remember what it was like to be school aged and the way that books opened my world and made me think critically about my values and challenge my assumptions and help me figure out, well, what do I believe or what do I not believe? And so when we read these books, we were just so pleasantly surprised with the quality of young adult literature these days, and the way that they offer representation. They speak to issues that our young people are actively grappling with. They talk about falling in love and understanding your sexuality, of dealing with grief and loss and the challenges and joys of friendship, particularly as a teenager. And they address social issues and what it is to feel lonely or feel forgotten, and the importance of valuing yourself and caring for your mental health. And they just reflect a reality of our young people in such thoughtful ways. And I am so glad that our young people in Polk County have access to these books. And I appreciate the thoughtfulness of this board in writing the policies and the ability to give parents a choice in what their own children have access to. But I just want to close by saying again, I'm so grateful for the way that you, our board, and our school system are valuing education and the importance of libraries with diverse reading materials. So thank you for all you do.
Next, we have Amber Kieran.
Hi, I just want to say thank you for taking the time to update your instructional and supplementary materials policy, because I do think it was needed, and I'm glad that you visited it and looked at it and went over it again. Every parent has the right to approve the books their own children read, but any other parent does not have the right to tell my children what they can read. Parents should also have the right to challenge a book if they think is inappropriate or request that their child not read it. But I would hope it's not just because someone else is telling them to do so. I also appreciate Polk County Schools recognizing the importance of librarians and of getting a librarian back into their high school. I hope that she will do more to get the teachers and the students in there to work collaboratively. As a school librarian and a public librarian for over 30 years, that's hard to say. It was my job to help teachers find appropriate materials, provide appropriate items for the student population, and work with both to extend and broaden their lessons. But also as a librarian, it was my job to make sure that the books and the materials were appropriate for the age level at the school. I also found that in every school or library that I worked, if kids were uncomfortable with what they were reading, they were just like me. They stopped and they returned the materials. I encourage parents to please trust your children and let them learn to think for themselves, because that's what education is all about.
Next, we have Amber Hall.
Hi, board. Missed y'all. Hope everybody had a good summer. I wasn't initially going to talk about the books. I was going to kind of let it be until we got a decision on the books. But that first off, I want to thank Todd Murphy, the middle school principal. Last year, we brought some assignments that we thought were questionable, that we were not aware of beforehand. So we didn't have a chance to go and look at the content, look at the assignment, look at the book, the textbook, whatever the case may be. We brought it to him at literally in end of May, beginning of June. He spoke about, would it make everybody feel better if there was a syllabus involved? At least an outline, so we could at least track where our kids were supposed to go. If nothing else, we could track where our kids were starting, what they were increasing to, where they were supposed to end. And he made that happen. When we went to parent teacher night, every class at the middle school, I know for a fact in 7th and 8th grade, I'm not sure about 6th because I don't have one in 6th grade, but I'm assuming it was throughout the school, but he did an amazing job and he followed through with that. So I just want to publicly give him props, because y'all hear a lot of negativity come out of me. But I do want to give respect where respect is due. And I want to address, y'all all know I was one of the parents that objected to these books. And I want to clarify something. It's not about banning books. It's about age-appropriate content. And if a student was to walk up to another student and say, I want to fuck you with a knife, that would be considered communicating a threat and sexual assault. So why is that okay for our kids to read it if it's not okay for our kids to say it to each other, first off? Second off, Polk County is a rural county. I was born and raised in Western North Carolina. That's why I moved to Polk County, because it was like my home county. But Polk County does have a local ordinance that is intact to this day about adult entertainment, adult bookstores, anything adult entertainment wise, if we can't have it for the adults to choose, why is it readily accessible for our children to read? We are asking for only age-appropriate material, not banning anything. The public library is right down the street. You got Google, you got Amazon, you got Best Buy, you got Kindles, you got all this stuff. So that's all I have to say tonight.
Next, we have Lynn Costi.
Pass.
Then Amy Valentine.
Good evening. I really don't have a lot to say. I was just going to say thank you very much for taking charge of the new school year ahead of us. It's always an exciting time when we start a new year and we have our students in front of us. We're always excited about sharing our love for learning and love for education. And that really is pretty much all I want to say. I think you guys are doing an amazing job. What you're doing is difficult, and my children are better off for attending the schools that you lead, and we appreciate you for that. Thank you.
And last, we have Jason Allen.
Good evening, board, and I do want to say thank you. You know, we do have some good teachers here, and we do have some good people up here as well. But when things have been brought up the chain, and you have some passionate parents that come forward, some that come across very aggressive. I know myself, I consider it being very passionate, not trying to be divisive or aggressive. But however, with that being said, I still find it inappropriate, and I don't think the word is fitting the content or however you guys wanted to claim it. It is age appropriate. When you have a book that we're asking just to move over, and this isn't a party line thing, folks, okay? I know people from both sides of the parties, if you want to go there, and I've had multiple discussions with multiple people that carry a doctorate degree as well. I myself don't, but I do have some college education background. I just choose not to go get my certificate. However, age appropriate. Sexually vulgar material that promotes pedophilia doesn't belong in any school. And this is from people with doctorate degrees, people that lean more towards the liberal side, people that lean more towards the conservative side. I've heard it from both. That is not something for children to have. That is college level, if you really want to go down a path, heavy literature, or go into psychology. Okay, college level psychology. You study the issues. So those kind of books were the things that I was addressing. Those kind of books were brought up the chain, and that's where our issues were lying. So by the time you got us here, we had already beaten down the path, gone through the channels as we were trying to do, okay, and not be mean to anybody. But when you have an upset parent, you got to find a way to calm them down too, okay? And you got to look at it this way. If you had somebody come, if you and your child stumble across a book, okay, and they brought it home to you, no child needs to see that kind of information. It's in extreme detail. I think somebody tried to quote the Bible at the last meeting. I watched it online. The Bible doesn't go into detail on what to use a lollipop for. And if you need to reference the book, it's The Bluest Eyes. And if you got problems with that and you think that's okay for your children to read, well, cool. Let me know who you are, because I just want to stay away from you. So, and that's all I have to say. All right, thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, that will conclude our public input. I would now be looking for a motion to move into closed session.
Second.
Motion and second, all in favor, say aye. Aye. Opposed, nay. Motion carries 7-0. Oh, for purposes of
Personnel and attorney client. Folks, thank y'all for being here tonight.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you.
Board, if you don't mind,
Okay.
if you don't mind staying right here, I've got the SROs here to talk specifically about a safety issue for just a minute or two, and then we'll do that in closed session. Is that okay? We do all this. So thank you. Just hang tight. Unless you need to.
Like the movie theater.
Kevin.
Run. We'll wait for you.
Thank
You
you.
get scratched out.
Thank you.
I believe I'm right.
Go. I mean, I'll go. Because the Winch's is-
It'll take a minute for the officers to get it.
Be my night.
No, I understand it. That's all.
Pleasure meeting you, sir. Great, you're a friend of Justice's people, aren't you?
I'm just saying.